The circulatory system is a transportation system. It transports oxygen, nutrients, and regulatory chemicals to your body's cells, tissues, and organs, while carrying away carbon dioxide and other wastes. Your circulatory system depends on blood. More than half of blood is water. Most of the rest is made up of cells and substances being delivered through the blood vessels to distant parts of your body. Plasma is the liquid component of blood. Plasma carries dissolved nutrients to your cells. Plasma also picks up dissolved waste products, which your cells return to the bloodstream, and carries them off to the lungs, liver, and kidneys for disposal. Those wastes include the gas carbon dioxide, a byproduct of cell metabolism. Plasma also carries many types of cells. The most prevalent are red blood cells, tiny disc-shaped cells that have no nucleus. Red blood cells carry oxygen to distant parts of the body. They pick up oxygen with a protein called hemoglobin. It contains iron, which forms a weak chemical bond with oxygen. When hemoglobin is oxygenated, it turns bright red, giving red blood cells their characteristic color. Different individuals may have different types of blood, with somewhat different chemical constituents.
Many years ago, when a patient needed a blood transfusion, they would select their spouse. The problem with these transfusions is the patient would die. The reason was that their blood was not compatible. Over the years, as testing has progressed, we've been able to determine that you must be a compatible blood type in order to receive a transfusion. You're either Group A, Group B, Group AB, or Group O. Today, when we test a patient to receive a blood transfusion, we determine the patient's blood type. We also take the unit of blood that they are to receive and test it against their serum. If a patient has either been pregnant or has received a transfusion in the past, there's a chance that they may have formed an antibody. This antibody could cause that unit of blood to be incompatible. So we test it to make sure that there's no incompatibilities and are able to give that blood out. Generally, testing can be done within 30 minutes.
The force that pushes blood through your circulatory system comes from your heart. This is a hollow muscular structure that propels the blood supply each time it contracts. Beating constantly from before birth until death, your heart must work harder than any other muscle in your body. Cardiac muscle cells are tightly joined to each other at regions called intercalated discs. This structure allows electrochemical impulses to spread quickly from cell to cell without the chemical messengers that other muscle cells require. These impulses cause the beating of your heart. Your heart is really two pumps in one. That's because it contains two pairs of chambers which pump blood in different directions. Each pair includes an atrium, one of the upper chambers of the heart. In the wall of the right atrium is the sinoatrial node, or pacemaker, specialized muscle tissue that gives off regular signals that maintain the rhythmic contractions of the parts of the heart. When each atrium contracts, blood is forced through a valve in its bottom wall. That valve limits the flow of blood, allowing it to move in only one direction, out of the atrium and into the ventricle or lower chamber below it. Next, a second node, the atrioventricular node, transmits an impulse to each ventricle, making it contract. The force of this contraction opens a semilunar valve at each ventricle's exit. Now, blood flows out of the heart. This cycle repeats over and over again, the atria and the ventricles contracting, one pair after the other. From the right ventricle, blood flows into your lungs through pulmonary arteries. Then it returns through pulmonary veins to your left atrium. This primes the left ventricle, which pumps blood into a longer circuit through the rest of the body. Now, blood makes contact with the trillions of cells that make up your body before it returns to the right atrium of your heart. Blood moving through the right chambers of the heart carries large amounts of carbon dioxide in its plasma, while its red blood cells are relatively low in oxygen. But when it makes the circuit through your lungs, the plasma gives up carbon dioxide, while the red blood cells pick up a fresh load of oxygen. So the blood returning from your lungs is bright red. rich in oxygenated hemoglobin. From the left chambers of your heart, that blood is sent on the longer circuit through your body, where it nourishes your cells. The heart keeps blood moving along both circuits at the same time, to the lungs and to the rest of the body.
Approximately 1% of children are born with various forms of heart problems. Of those, the most common include holes between the heart chambers. These holes between the heart chambers can be between the upper chambers of the heart, the atria, or between the lower chambers, the ventricles. The normal heart is divided into two parts, a right and left half, by a wall which is called the septum. The two upper chambers are divided by the atrial septum. Children can be born with a hole in that wall, an atrial septal defect, and likewise children can be born with a hole in the wall that divides the ventricles, a ventricular septal defect. In both situations, what happens is that blood from the left side of the heart passes through the hole to the right side of the heart, either through the atrial septal defect or through the ventricular septal defect. So one has more blood than normal going to the right ventricle and out to the lungs. This does put some strain on the heart, and in addition results in too much blood going through the lungs, which can make children short of breath. In this situation, with the strain on the heart, the circulation can become inadequate, so that these kids can manifest with symptoms such as easy fatigability, getting tired easily, becoming pale and sweating a lot. In the situation where you're dealing with a small hole, these small holes may not have any symptoms associated with them and can in fact sometimes cure themselves and close by themselves. If you're dealing with a large defect, in order to prevent life-threatening problems in the future, these defects do need to be closed using an operation. What the surgeon does at the time of operation is to open up the right side of the heart, to visualize the hole, and depending on the size and shape of that hole, may be able to either stitch the hole closed or may need to stitch a patch over the hole.
Oxygenated blood is conducted to body tissues by arteries. The structure of these arteries assists the movement of blood. Each artery is lined by a single layer of cells. Over this is another layer that stretches from the pressure of each heartbeat, then rebounds. Each rebound gives blood a little squeeze and helps move it along. Wrapped around the artery is another layer of smooth muscle and elastic tissue. In a large artery, the muscle is controlled by nerve fibers, whose signals cause the muscles to contract. This changes the diameter of the artery, regulating the amount of blood that flows through it. Over the muscles is an outer layer of connective tissue. The artery that emerges from the heart's left ventricle is called the aorta. This large tube branches into smaller arteries that serve different parts of your body. One of the branches, a coronary artery, carries blood to the muscle cells of the heart itself. Cardiac muscles can't make use of the nutrients and oxygen in the blood passing through the heart's chambers, so they depend on the coronary arteries for nourishment. Two carotid arteries run up the sides of your neck, carrying blood to your brain, and the subclavian and brachiocephalic arteries branch out through your shoulders and down your arms. The main part of the aorta continues down behind the heart, sending branches to all your abdominal organs. Two renal arteries branch off, one going to each kidney, where wastes are removed from the blood. Still, another division sends a common iliac artery down each leg. Most arteries are buried deep within your body, but they're near the surface in places like your wrist and neck. There you can feel the waves of increased pressure each time blood is pumped by a heartbeat. These pressure waves are called your pulse. As your arteries branch, they direct oxygenated, nutrient-rich blood to different parts of your body. They divide into smaller vessels called arterioles, fine blood vessels that thread through your tissues, bringing blood closer and closer to individual cells. Eventually, arterioles feed blood into capillaries, vessels whose walls are only 1 cell thick, vessels so narrow that they conduct red blood cells single file. In these vessels, the vital exchanges between your blood and your body's cells take place. Here, a major task of your circulatory system begins, the nourishment of your tissues. The weak chemical bonds between oxygen and hemoglobin break within the red blood cells. Oxygen is released. Accompanied by nutrients, oxygen diffuses through the walls of capillaries, passing out of the blood and into the interstitial fluid between your cells. This fluid is really plasma that has been forced out of the blood through the capillary walls. Here, an important exchange takes place. Oxygen and nutrients diffuse from the interstitial fluid into your cells. Meanwhile, carbon dioxide and other waste products diffuse outward from your cells into the fluid. Some of these wastes pass back through the capillary walls and are picked up by the bloodstream. The capillaries carry your blood into tiny vessels called venules, which merge into larger and larger veins. This returning venous blood has lost much of its ability to nourish your body tissues. Its red blood cells have unloaded some of their oxygen, and the plasma has picked up wastes. Now blood must return to your heart and be pumped through your lungs before it is useful again for carrying oxygen. The thin walls of each vein are tugged by skeletal muscles that squeeze the blood onward. A series of valves allows the blood to flow toward your heart. Some fluid and proteins have been lost from the circulatory system when plasma passed through the capillary walls. What happens to this excess protein and interstitial fluid? Now called lymph, it flows through ducts to lymph nodes, which cleanse it of any infections it might have picked up. Then, lymph drains into subclavian veins, where it re-enters your blood circulating system. All your veins merge into the vena cava, a large vessel which conducts blood into the right atrium of your heart. Your body has several ways to control the pace of this cycle. The pacemaker in your heart signals constantly, setting a basic tempo for your heartbeat. But that tempo can be sped up by signals from nerve centers near your spinal cord, or slowed by signals from your brainstem. These changes increase or decrease the flow of blood through all your tissues. When you're under stress, your adrenal glands produce the hormone epinephrine, which speeds up your heartbeat. At the same time, the muscles of an artery wall can contract and narrow the artery, reducing the flow of blood to one part of your body. Or those muscles can relax and widen the artery, allowing more blood to flow.
Following a surgical incision or cut, the small blood vessels at the site of the cut, the capillaries, become constricted, following which the blood clotting mechanism comes into play, whereby the platelets clump, blood clot formation occurs and seals off those vessels. Thereafter, with time, fibrosis or scar formation occurs at that site.
Blood plasma contains tiny disc-shaped cell fragments, half the size of a red blood cell, called platelets. Platelets tend to stick to rough surfaces, like the tissue exposed at a blood vessel break. Here, they form the foundation for a blood clot. Infectious agents are controlled by white blood cells. These destroy and remove many living and non-living substances that can cause infection or disease. Some are found in lymph nodes, located along the lymph vessels. The health of all your body cells depends on your circulatory system. It transports to your cells the substances they need. It removes waste products, and it protects you from invading bacteria, fungi, and viruses. This is the function of your circulatory system. Your heart, blood, and lymphatic vessels, the fluids and cells they contain, all working together every minute of your life.